in this Easter season where we get different resurrection appearances. Last week we had one, and now we have this one, and you get that after Easter. We're in the season of white Easter stuff, and we get Jesus come back from the dead. But the disciples in this passage, it's interesting, they're not sure that this is really Jesus. They think it's a ghost, which I think is kind of funny. And then they even Jesus says that great line, have you got anything to eat, I love this picture of Jesus. Those thoughts kind of made me think about a time when I was much younger, when I was probably more playful and, fun. When I was playing with my younger brother, and he and I, one of the games we'd play when we were growing up, because it was big in our time, right, was Ghostbusters, right? We would play Ghostbusters together, and which is kind of ironic, I think, given the gospel for today where Jesus is that ghost, right? We didn't bust Jesus, I promise you, but we played Ghostbusters, and I always had to have the proton backpack that we got from the toy store. I had to carry the real particle beam accelerator thing to shoot the ghost. That was what I had to have. And my brother, well, he had to pretend that he had the same thing, and I just gave him a golf club. Right? I was that kind of a brother. I'm ruining the picture of me all over the place today. That's what I did. And it was funny, because there was not 1 ounce of doubt for my brother that we were playing, that we weren't, getting the ghost together. He had no doubts. I find out now, come to think about it, that I was the one with the doubts, that I had to have the real stuff to know that I was playing the right way, right? I was the one who had the doubts. We have these pictures of these disciples with doubts, these ones who are startled and afraid at these ghosts that they think they're seeing. That they have to see the real thing of Jesus. They have to see his real hands and feet. They have to see his scars, right? And then there's that great line, while in their joy, they were disbelieving and still wondering, all at the same time. And then it's that moment that Jesus says that line, have y'all got anything here to eat? That in the midst of their disbelieving and wondering, Jesus becomes, I think, most human. Jesus becomes tangible as fish, as tangible as bread and wine, taken to eat from the table. These disciples, they spent so much time with Jesus, listening, hearing everything he said, hearing all that Jesus foretold. Right? I equate that with us. The disciples are like us, ones who maybe know the stories by heart. We've heard them our whole lives, right? Or maybe we can even do some of the liturgy pieces without looking at the bulletin, right? Whatever that means. This group of disciples who we think should get it, right? And we're right there with them. And the fact is, this group of disciples is still disbelieving and wondering. They can't believe what they're seeing. They have questions. They struggle. I think there's good news in that for us. For those of us who struggle and question, for all of us who wonder about this resurrection stuff and what it means, that there is still a place for those questions at the table. There's places for all of us as community to wrestle together. I think there's good news there for us. When I think about the story, I imagine the disciples looking at Jesus and just staring, almost gawking at Jesus, staring at his hands and feet, their fingers kind of running over the wounds. And I imagine them maybe even staring at the broiled fish, waiting and watching to see what he's going to do with it, what's going to happen. And I wonder if Peter remembered that moment of staring at Jesus when, come to find much later in the reading from Acts today, right before what happens in our reading is Peter and John have healed a man born lame because of a birth defect. And suddenly people are astonished at this. They don't know what's happening. And so they all come, and then our reading from Acts starts. And Peter says, you Israelites, why do you wonder at what's happening? Why do you stare at us? Like, is this something that we did of our own power? Right? Seems like staring and wondering seems to kind of come full circle, maybe. So perhaps even for us, we stare at the empty cross. Stare and try to make sense of what it means to be a resurrection people. Because sometimes, even in our Easter joy, we stare, disbelieving and still wondering, looking for resurrection peace to be with us. Because the truth is, the resurrection didn't eliminate the cross. Christ still had the scars on his hands and feet. The resurrection, it doesn't eliminate the marks that we bear with us sometimes. But it means that death cannot limit the possibility and the peace of God's love and God's activity in the future. The resurrection means that God's love refuses to be dominated by past events of hurt or pain, but allows us to imagine a future that is different than what we could imagine otherwise. That's what the resurrection does for us. The resurrection reminds us of the promise of what God has already done. Like 1 John says, it reminds us that, beloved, we are children of God now. It says we still wait to figure out what that will look like, what that means to be a child of God, but that it will be revealed when Christ appears. It says that. And so we want to see that. We wonder what that might look like. So perhaps we stare at the cross. When we look at the cross, we see this shape of God's past love toward us. But we also see the shape of what God has promised to do. We see the shape of God's final gift to change us and shape us with God's love through what God shows in the cross. So that we know now that what will be is shown in His love. And it's seen through us when we show that love to others. See, here's the thing. We may wonder and doubt, but we are declared children of God now by God's love. And that promise for the future begins to shape radically our lives for the present and how we live to make a difference. A member this week that sent me a note to share with me a story about their adventure of a weekend as a hospice volunteer in the hospital. And she sent me a note and told me about an 11-day-old infant boy who was born with some birth deformities and prognosis wasn't good. And as a result of those complications, parents pretty much abandoned the child. What do you do? Well, they walked into the hospital room and really did the only thing I think anyone could do. The nurses were busy and were overwhelmed with a lot of work, and she sat down and took the boy in her arms, and held him for 5 hours. Held this boy, sang hymns, made the sign of the cross on his forehead, talked to him about a God of love, God that we know, that we hope in. She held the boy until the young boy crossed over into the world beyond our imagination. Beloved, we are children of God now. Because now, not even death can change the possibility of God's love poured out into this world, poured out in moments of crisis like that in our present. Because of the resurrection, that not even death can eliminate the possibilities of the future. Moments like that, when Christ appears, when one becomes the arms and hands of Christ, when one child of God holds another child of God, the risen Christ appears. This is the identity that we bear in this Easter season. This is the promise that we know to be true as a resurrection